You're lying on your back in the dirt, a Roman soldier's knee pinning your chest, and you're about to discover why the Gladius, that short, brutal sword barely longer than your forearm, conquered half the known world not through reach or power, but through 4 inches of precisely angled steel sliding between your ribs. Right now, in this moment, you have maybe 3 seconds before the blade finds the gap in your defenses. And in those 3 seconds, you'll understand more about violence, anatomy, and imperial engineering than a lifetime of peace could ever teach you. The Gladius wasn't designed to look impressive. It wasn't meant for duels or single combat glory. It was designed by military engineers who studied human anatomy, tested blade angles on prisoners and gladiators, and calculated the exact depth needed to destroy a human body with minimum effort and maximum efficiency. And the answer they discovered, written in blood across 3 continents, was 4 inches. That's all Rome needed to kill you. Here's what happens in the first second. The soldier's shield has already smashed into you, that's how you ended up on your back. The scutum, that massive rectangular shield, weighs 22 pounds, and when driven forward by a trained legionary's legs and core, it hits like a battering ram. Your weapon, whatever it was, spear, sword, axe, is gone now, knocked aside or trapped under the shield's edge. You're trying to breathe, but the impact has knocked the air from your lungs. Your arms are pinned or useless. The soldier's knee is on your sternum, his full weight concentrated through that single point. You can feel your ribs flexing, threatening to crack. He's not looking at your face. He's looking at your torso, identifying the killing zone with the same detached focus you'd use to butcher an animal, because that's what you are now. Meat that needs processing. Second. The Gladius is already moving. It's not a wild swing or a powerful chop. It's a compact, controlled thrust, the blade traveling maybe 18 inches total from guard position to penetration. The soldier's elbow stays tight to his body. His wrist is locked. All the force comes from his shoulder and back, driving forward and slightly upward. The blade is 20 inches long, double-edged, tapered to a wicked point. But he's not trying to run you through. He's aiming for a specific gap between your ribs just below your left pectoral muscle, angled upward at approximately 30 degrees. Roman training manuals were explicit about this. Aim for the soft tissue just below the rib cage. Thrust upward, 4 inches of penetration. The Gladius design, that specific taper, that particular point geometry, was optimized through generations of military experience to slip between ribs without getting caught on bone. The blade width at 4 inches of depth is narrow enough to slide through the intercostal gap, but wide enough that when it moves inside you, it destroys everything it touches. Second, you feel it. Not pain yet, that comes later if there is a later. What you feel first is pressure, then a sensation like cold water spreading through your chest cavity. The blade has penetrated your pleural space, the thin gap between your lung and chest wall. Air is rushing into a space where air should never be, your lung is collapsing. But that's not what's killing you. What's killing you is that the blade, angled upward, has just punctured your heart. Not a wild stab into the center of your chest, that would hit your sternum, a solid bone shield that stops blades. No, the soldier aimed for the gap, slid under the rib cage, angled upward, and the point of the Gladius has just torn through the bottom of your left ventricle. 4 inches, that's all it took. Your heart is now pumping blood directly into your chest cavity instead of through your arteries. You have maybe 15 seconds of consciousness remaining. Now understand why this weapon design changed military history. Before Rome standardized the Gladius, most Mediterranean warfare involved longer weapons, spears, long swords, weapons designed for reach and sweeping strikes. Combat was about maintaining distance, about outranging your opponent, about powerful cuts that could break through armor or shields. The Gladius inverted that logic completely. It was designed for close combat, for fighting in formation, where reach doesn't matter because you're shoulder to shoulder with your fellow soldiers and the enemy is pressed against your shield wall. In that environment, long weapons are useless. You can't swing a 3-foot blade when there's no room to swing, but you can thrust. And a thrust requires only inches of movement to deliver lethal force. Roman military training was built around this reality. Vegetius, writing in the 4th century but describing much earlier practices, recorded that gladiator trainers were brought in to teach legionaries the science of the thrust. Recruits practiced against wooden posts for hours daily, learning not power but precision. Where to aim, what angle to use, how to read an opponent's body position and identify the killing zones. They learned that a 4-inch thrust to the throat, the armpit, the groin, or the subrib thorax would kill efficiently, while wild slashing attacks, even if they connected, would often leave an opponent alive and dangerous. The goal wasn't to wound. It was to remove the enemy from combat permanently, immediately, with minimum expenditure of energy so you could move to the next target. Here's what the archaeological evidence tells us. Thousands of gladii have been recovered from battlefields, forts, and refuse pits across the Roman Empire. Metallurgical analysis reveals sophisticated manufacturing, high-carbon steel edges welded to wrought iron cores, creating blades that held an edge through repeated thrusting impacts while remaining flexible enough not to shatter on bone. But here's the disturbing detail. Blade wear patterns on recovered gladii show the most damage in the first 4 to 6 inches from the point. The rest of the blade, those final 14 inches toward the hilt, shows minimal wear. Roman soldiers weren't running people through. They were doing exactly what their training taught them: controlled thrusts, 4 inches deep, then immediate withdrawal to free the blade for the next target. Deeper penetration was unnecessary and tactically dangerous because it meant your weapon was embedded in a body, making you vulnerable while you extracted it. The human bodies excavated from Roman battle sites confirm this with disturbing clarity. Skeletal remains from the Kalkriese battlefield, where Germanic tribes ambushed and destroyed 3 Roman legions in 9 CE, show numerous injuries. But the fatal wounds are almost universally puncture injuries to the thorax, throat, and upper abdomen, narrow penetrations, 4 to 6 inches deep, delivered with enough force to pierce bone but not shatter it. No wild hacking, no dramatic decapitations, just efficient, systematic killing. The Germanic casualties show similar patterns. The legionaries who died that day were killed the same way they killed, with short, precise thrusts to vital areas. This is the part military historians rarely emphasize because it's uncomfortable. The gladius wasn't a warrior's weapon. It was a butcher's tool, optimized for industrial-scale killing. Roman tactics centered on creating situations where gladius technique could be applied efficiently. Form the shield wall, press forward, use the scutum to knock enemies off balance or trap their weapons, thrust through the gaps, move to the next target. Repeat, the soldier didn't need to be particularly strong or skilled in the romantic sense of swordsmanship. He needed to be disciplined, physically conditioned, and willing to execute the mechanical actions he'd practiced thousands of times. Stab. Withdraw, step, stab. The violence was systematized, reduced to reproducible technique, stripped of everything except function, and it worked with horrifying effectiveness. Ancient sources describe Roman legions cutting through enemy formations like scythes through grain. Polybius, the Greek historian who witnessed Roman military tactics firsthand, wrote with barely concealed horror about how Roman soldiers could kill Gallic warriors, huge men with long slashing swords and impressive martial traditions, without breaking formation. The Gauls would swing their long blades in powerful arcs that the Romans simply caught on their shields, then immediately thrust upward into the exposed armpit or throat. 4 inches. Dead, next target. The Gauls' weapons and fighting style, designed for individual combat and displays of courage, were tactically obsolete against an army that had reduced warfare to coordinated mechanical violence. Let's return to you lying in the dirt with 4 inches of steel in your chest. You're still conscious, your vision is tunneling, you can hear sounds but they're distant, muffled. The soldier has already pulled the blade out. It took him less than a second, a practiced motion he's done dozens or hundreds of times before. He's not looking at you anymore. You're no longer a threat, so you're no longer relevant. He's already moving to his next target, the gladius held in guard position, ready for the next thrust. You're drowning internally, your chest cavity filling with blood, your collapsed lung fluttering uselessly. Your brain is screaming for oxygen your cardiovascular system can no longer deliver. The pain hasn't really started yet, you're in shock, your body flooded with endorphins and adrenaline. That's a mercy. You'll be unconscious in seconds, dead in under a minute. 4 inches of blade, precisely placed, delivered by a man who learned this technique through repetition and practice, who thinks of it not as murder but as his job, his duty, his contribution to Rome's imperium. Now multiply your death by thousands. The Battle of Cannae in 216 BCE. 50 to 70,000 Roman soldiers killed in a single afternoon, most by blade wounds to the thorax and neck. The Siege of Numantia in 133 BCE. An entire city of 40,000 people, military and civilian, systematically killed when they refused to surrender. The Jewish Revolt of 70 CE. Over 1 million dead according to Josephus, probably an exaggeration, but even if the real number was a tenth of that, it's still 100,000 individual deaths. 100,000 moments of steel sliding between ribs, 100,000 bodies that stopped functioning because 4 inches of metal destroyed something vital. The gladius didn't just kill individuals, it killed societies. Every time Rome conquered a region, the gladius was the instrument of pacification. Rebellions were suppressed with systematic slaughter. Leaders were executed publicly, often after being displayed in triumphal processions. Populations that resisted were reduced through carefully calculated violence, not genocide in the modern sense, but strategic killing designed to break resistance without depopulating regions so thoroughly that they became economically worthless. Roman commanders understood the mathematics of terror. Kill enough people, brutally enough, publicly enough, and the survivors become compliant. The Gladius made that mathematics possible. Here's the evidence carved into the historical record. After the Third Servile War, the Spartacus Rebellion, Rome crucified 6,000 captured slaves along the Appian Way from Rome to Capua. But before the crucifixions, most of those men were wounded by gladii in combat or executed by thrust to the heart. The crosses were for display, for terror, for sending a message. The actual killing was done with the short sword, efficiently, systematically, as part of routine military operations. The Gladius didn't make that atrocity possible, human cruelty made it possible. But the Gladius made it efficient. The metallurgical sophistication behind the weapon reveals how seriously Rome took the science of killing. Different Gladius patterns evolved for different tactical situations. The Mainz pattern with its long point for maximum penetration, the Pompeii pattern with its triangular point for better bone deflection, the later Spatha pattern that lengthened the blade for cavalry use. Each design was tested, refined, and standardized based on battlefield performance. Roman armories produced these weapons by the tens of thousands, maintaining quality control that wouldn't be matched until industrial manufacturing. The empire ran on logistics, and the Gladius was a logistical component, standardized, reproducible, maintainable in the field. And the men who wielded these weapons, they weren't monsters, they were professionals. Farmers' sons from Italy and Gaul and Hispania, trained for months or years, paid regularly, promoted based on performance. They followed orders, maintained their equipment, and executed the techniques they'd learned. The violence they committed wasn't exceptional or sadistic, it was routine. Expected, part of the job description. That's what makes it so disturbing. The Gladius didn't require hatred to be effective. It didn't require bloodlust or rage. The definitive truth is this: Rome conquered the known world not through superior courage or divine favor, but through superior violence, technology, and the systematic application of lethal force. The Gladius was the physical manifestation of that superiority. A weapon optimized through empirical testing and refinement to kill human beings as efficiently as possible with minimum risk to the wielder. 4 inches of penetration to the thorax, delivered in formation, repeated across thousands of soldiers, accumulated into a killing capacity that no contemporary military could match. The empire was built on this foundation of calculated mechanical violence, and every road, aqueduct, and forum was paid for in bodies that stopped working, because someone who trained for this moment knew exactly where to put the blade and exactly how deep to push it. If you've gained any understanding of how military technology shapes human history, how violence becomes systematized and normalized, how empires actually function beneath the marble and rhetoric, then subscribe to Mythbusting. We're going to keep examining the machinery of historical violence, not to glorify it but to understand it, because the patterns repeat and the lessons matter. The Gladius is gone, but the logic that created it, the willingness to optimize killing, to reduce human death to engineering problems, to train people to commit violence as routine professional duty, that logic is still with us. What historical weapon or military technology should we dissect next? Tell us in the comments below.